All right, this one came from a viewer of this, actually asked me to address what's going on in the bourbon industry. And if you listen to my podcast, the Bourbon Daily or the Bourbon Show, we've talked about this on both of them. I've talked at length about what's going on in the bourbon industry. But if you're not a listener, there's not necessarily always crossover. There certainly are some, but not everyone crosses over and listens to the podcast as well. This individual said, yeah, I don't listen to your podcast. I want to know what you think of what's going on in the bourbon industry right now. And I will say this, mainstream media has picked up on the fact that there are issues in the bourbon industry. Now, I don't think they're doing the bourbon industry any justice. I don't think they're really doing themselves any justice for people in the know. Now, most people aren't in the know. Most people aren't connected and know what's going on in the bourbon industry. They're just going to believe whatever they read and how it's presented. And I think it's been presented in a pretty unjournalistic way. I feel like that's part of the problem that we have as a country at the moment, that we don't really have journalists anymore. The idea of reading a newspaper is almost offensive these days because, that's old news. Why would I buy a newspaper? But when we had all those newspapers, we had thousands and thousands of people who were paid to be professional reporters. And those individuals kept on top of things, and there was sort of a checks and balances within our country, I believe. With all that goes away and everything's online, and again, it allows things to be updated. It's almost like a media and news that you read because you're reading it on a website is like a live feed because it can be updated continuously. With a newspaper, you're going to get what happens at 2 or 3 in the morning when it goes to print, and that locks in what you're going to hear until the next day. Or you're going to get an update from your news that you're watching if you have time to do that. Most people don't even have time to do that anymore. And then you would get it the next day. So I get why it's such an outdated mode of reaching individuals, but things were just better back when we had that. So these days, you're relying on people with not the level of integrity and journalism that we had in the past. Many times we're relying on, for these websites that aggregate the thing, your Googles of the world, your Yahoos, or wherever you're reading your online news, they're relying on bloggers and people with really no experience. And in some ways, they, don't even follow the procedures of true journalism. So, but the problem with mainstream media picking this up is, again, they're going on what they've seen, what their reporters have seen. Again, they're not experts in the bourbon industry. If I'm a writer for Newsweek or the New York Post, and they say go out and find out, I hear something's going on in bourbon. What's going on? So they go out and look at what information's available online, and it sounds pretty bad, right? I mean, Kentucky Owl is filed bankruptcy. You've got Luca Mariano filed bankruptcy. You've got Garrard County filed bankruptcy. And then they just hit on those 3 things, basically like a cheap aggregator does, and just pulls that information together and says, wow, all the distilleries are going out of business. And it's a terrible time to be in the bourbon industry, and a lot of these are like, yet another beloved Kentucky distillery files bankruptcy. Were any of these beloved Kentucky distilleries, were any of these the ones that people talk about and are drinking? I don't think so. And, they've done such a poor job of managing their news. They're talking about stuff like tariffs, how it impacted. Tariffs had nothing to do with any of those 3. The future of the industry might hinge on tariffs and things like that. I don't actually know, but certainly, the Kentucky Owl happened last November. They filed bankruptcy. It literally has absolutely. There's no way you can tie anything to tariffs or anything like that with that story. The other 2 are after that, but again, if you look at these close enough, you're talking about mismanagement. There were certainly problems at Garrard County before they filed bankruptcy. The founder of the company was kicked out of the company. They hired an incredible master distiller that only was there, a week or 2 at the most, not there very long. Luca Mariano, it sounds, again, I don't think there's anything bad there. I just think that maybe they got in over their head. They came in at the wrong time, and they opened up a very large distillery, and cash flow is such an issue and things like that. And I guess they're like $34 million is what I heard, in the hole. And they're planning on working their way through that. And we'll see what happens in the bankruptcy courts. But these things are not reflective of the industry doing bad as a whole. And certainly things are down a little bit. I'm not saying it's all great and sunshine and rainbows. But if you are a bourbon fan, if you're a person like me who's just at the end of the day a fan, I may own this business, I may own a media company, but at the end of the day, I'm just a fan of bourbon. And I always look through the lens of the person who is a fan. And I think that for us, it's a great time to be a bourbon fan. They're coming out with new things. It seems to be, they're hitting on all the things that we like, right? Price is becoming, an issue where, they're lowering prices. I've got barrel picks in here right now that are, $60 and $50 and $65. I mean, this is great value bourbon. I'm talking about whiskey, not, 18-month-year-old whiskey here. I'm talking about stuff that's 6, 7, 10 years old. We got a 10-year-old rye here from Dan's and Goat, $55. Holy cow. And it is amazing. It's finished in a vanilla extract barrel. Man, it's like just, I don't know, it's a rye, but it tastes like a bourbon with those vanilla notes. And it's not overly done. It's just fantastic. So I think from our perspective, the bourbon fan perspective, no need to worry. Things are going fine. The big guys are going to be fine. I get it. They're going to have to reallocate how they do things. Overseas with the tariff situation, of course, you've got tariffs put on stuff, and then you got retribution, and things go back and forth, and it's a big pissing contest. You don't need to be in that. I don't need to be in that. You don't want to be in that. They don't need to be in that. Sell it to us and get more creative. And that's why we're seeing things now like, we have Eagle Rare 10, and then we have Eagle Rare 12, and, Old Granddad, one of my favorites, the Bottle and Bond. We got the regular Bottle and Bond, the 4-year-old product, and now we have a 7-year-old, which is, deeper and richer in flavor and things like that. I think that's an exciting thing for a bourbon fan. So I think times are pretty good. I don't think that we're losing bourbon fans. I think that, kind of the perfect storm of bad things happen to bourbon. And again, you have to, when you're planning for what's going to happen in a market, you have to, look at your numbers today and then forecast out. Well, now, and it's hard to believe that we're talking about COVID being 5 years ago, but it is. We're 2025. COVID started, in 2020, or 2019 it started, but it really hit in 2020 when a lot of us, were sent home from our jobs and stuff like that. So, 5 years ago, they're forecasting based on these numbers that were going crazy during COVID. Obviously, people were home, didn't have things to do. We know that. With the benefit of hindsight, they started drinking more. Hey, I'm working from home. I might have a cocktail while I'm working today. Whatever. Well, no judgment here. You do whatever you want. But again, the numbers were just skewed high, and of course they're forecasting based off that. Now the next generation, this Generation Z, if you will. They're not drinking as much. I get it. They're young people. They've been raised in an environment health conscious, and that's good. And hopefully that continues throughout the course of their lives. And but I think at some point they will, start drinking. And again, don't jump in and say, I know somebody who's 23 years old and is Gen Z and drinks. I get it. But in general, when sweeping generalities, that generation isn't as drinking as much as, the Gen X like me or the millennials, and who jumped in right away. And, big part of the bourbon boom was the millennials jumped in. Even my generation, Gen X, we didn't jump into bourbon right away. It was kind of like you drink other stuff first, and then when you get a little older, your palate will develop and you'll start liking whiskey. And but it seems like the millennials kind of spoiled us a little bit because they jumped in and liked whiskey, as soon as they turned 21. So things are a little bit different with this next generation, but I think they'll come around, and I think they'll start wanting to discover bourbon. So I don't think that's an issue at all. I think the big companies are fine. I think people that are making great whiskey are fine. I think the ones that are in trouble are the ones that have over-leveraged themselves. All these companies that thought they could be the MGP of Kentucky, there's like a dozen of them. There can't be 12 MGPs of Kentucky. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. There wasn't that much demand. Even if things continued on at its highest, there was going to be problems. We talked about that many times. So I think overall, I would say that the bourbon industry is in pretty good shape. There's no bubble burst or anything like that. I think it's business as usual with a little bit of a hiccup. But I think that things will start normalizing. I think the bad ones are going to fall by the wayside. There is going to be some continued consolidation. We may see some more bankruptcies coming up and things like that, but that doesn't mean it's over. Things are good. I look at our volume, we're up in this store. We continue to grow, and we are a high-end whiskey store. So I think that's a good indicator that things are okay. If a high-end whiskey store is doing good, I think the overall industry is doing just fine. And so don't believe what you read. Things are not going away in bourbon. Things are just fine. And of course, we'll see you next time because we're going to be enjoying bourbon.